It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. As you can see, we have a guest on today's show, a third screen on your screen. Alan, I'm going to let you do the introduction here. You brought JP into the fold. Tell the folks about JP.
Yeah, JP Acosta is a national NFL and college football writer for SB Nation. Met JP down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. JP is from Florida, and we got some Jacksonville ties today. And as this morning's ridiculousness was unfolding, I was like, I need somebody to talk about this. How about JP? JP, what's up? Thanks for coming on, and welcome to the show.
Nothing much. Thank you guys for having me on. It does feel like this is a great first episode to be on, especially considering everything that happened this morning when it comes to the Steelers and the Jaguars.
JP, first things first, before we talk about any of that, the first thing that we do anytime somebody comes on here for the very first time, we need your thoughts on the music in that little intro that we brought in.
I thought it was really good. It feels like a good pace setter to start the show. You know, not everybody needs to have like the smooth podcast intro. Sometimes you need something that'll pick the energy up, get people in. So I like it.
Yeah, people can't see, but we're bobbing our heads basically the entire time in the background before we're actually on the screen.
Every day. It gets me going.
So yeah, we appreciate that. We always tell that's how we get the people in. Then the content, it's probably going downhill, but we got you in to watch the episode just based off the intro. But anyways, we're about 2 minutes into this thing. Let's talk about why we brought you into the fold here today. The name Trevor Lawrence floated around this morning, not in a way that I expected to see. I log on to twitter.com and I see Trevor Lawrence's name mentioned because a report put out that the Pittsburgh Steelers had reached out to the Jaguars about his availability and even throw in some opinion in there, which I don't think people were taking as opinion at first, saying it would be a first and second round pick this year that Pittsburgh would send the Jaguars' way in this deal. And I was like, what in the world is going on? Like, what am I waking up to on this random Thursday morning? And who better to shed some light on this? JP, what were your thoughts when you first saw this?
So my first thought was actually a quote tweet of Andrew Filipponi. He said the first second round pick for Trevor Lawrence. And I was like, and then we turn off the PlayStation and go to bed. Because that doesn't work in the real world. First of all, Trevor Lawrence has a no trade clause in his contract.
Right.
If he wants to leave Jacksonville, he will activate, he will tell you where he wants to go, which will waive the no trade clause. Second of all, the Jaguars don't have a GM. I don't know who the source was or who in the Steelers was talking to in the Jaguars organization, but there's currently not a GM. So unless you were talking to freaking Chris Jericho or something about trading for Trevor Lawrence,
tree, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You go to the learning tree. But I just don't understand where all of this comes from. It feels like the part of the season where we get really into the fan fiction sort of stuff, especially in that time between the Super Bowl and the combine and the draft happening. It feels like we need something to happen. And so everybody just boom, Trevor Lawrence trade rumor. Let's start it without actually understanding that for the Jaguars to trade Trevor Lawrence, they would have to eat a whole lot of dead cap. And also, they don't have a GM. I don't think that's really understood a lot. They're still actively doing GM interviews. So I don't know who the Steelers are talking to within the organization. They must think Trent Baalke is still around there somewhere.
I think maybe did this happen on Khan's yacht in New Orleans at 4 a.m. local time? Is that because okay, anything goes then? Yeah, sure, maybe it got brought up. I don't know. I'm sure when I first saw this, I was like, well, that's not going to happen. And there's 100 good reasons why it's not going to happen. Like you said, Lawrence has no trade clause, has never expressed any desire to leave Jacksonville. I think the cap actually could work, but it's not ideal. The Steelers have never given anybody even 1/10 of the amount of guaranteed salary that Lawrence has on his contract. So I don't know why they would suddenly want to do that. And the Jaguars just hired Liam Cohn, who said in his introductory press conference, this is all going to be about Trevor Lawrence. What none of it makes
any
sense.
Bridges got burned by Liam Cohen in Tampa to work with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, especially that exit. It does make some sense for the Steelers to just be calling literally everyone to be like, so you have a quarterback with a pulse and we do not. What would it take to get yours? So, like, for me, from that point, I'm sure there was some conversation had by someone with someone. It could have been official and high level. It could have been unofficial and low level. Two coaches who are buddies chopping it up at the Super Bowl saying, hey, what would it take? Would be interested if that would be something you guys would consider. I'm sure something happened. But I didn't think this was ever going to happen for a lot of good reasons, as you mentioned.
What you're saying there about the Jaguars not having a GM is why you would think that would never come to fruition. But at the same time, I think that's why you can make the case that this is why the Steelers are approaching them because there's so much turnover taking place within that organization. Maybe that is the time to be like, oh, I wonder if they want a fresh start, just like across the board.
Hey, you know what? If the Lakers can trade for Luka Doncic while giving up absolutely nothing, and the Mavs GM's going out and be like, hey, we'll give you Luka Doncic, anything can happen. Maybe
hold on.
Maybe the coalition
Jaguars need a GM. Is Nico Harrison getting an interview anytime soon in Jacksonville? As if so,
I would do dastardly things to the Jaguars organization if they hire Nico Harrison.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I think there's a level of, I don't even know, like the first and second round pick, I actually think like that kind of feels, I don't think that's enough for the Jaguars to give up on Trevor Lawrence, but like, I don't know. JP, what is your feelings about what Trevor Lawrence's value would be? Like, he was obviously a number 1 overall pick, and I know the Jaguars are not going to be motivated sellers here, but the numbers were not great last year before the injury. There's a lot of guaranteed money. Like, I think this is one of those moves where I don't even think it would have made sense for either side, because I don't even really see him as I'm questioning whether this contract is going to be worth it at this point.
So, of course, I am a little biased because I am a Jaguars fan, but I think Trevor Lawrence is still a very good quarterback. I think a lot of what has happened since that 8-game collapse in 2023 was a result of organizational and play calling failure. And I think the biggest thing to understand when you watch Trevor Lawrence is that, yes, he is a very good quarterback, but no, he cannot do everything by himself. And that's where I think we have to start and I say we royally, when it comes to discussing the NFL as a whole, we cannot expect every quarterback to come in and carry a franchise, and I think Trevor Lawrence has basically kind of carried the Jaguars franchise on his back and taken them to respectability until this season when his arm completely fell off towards the end of it. But I think the most informative and instructive thing for watching Trevor Lawrence is the first half of the 2023 season going into the back half of 2022, when you could see the confidence and you could see his ability to throw at every single level of the field. And I also think he's a really good deep ball passer, but the infrastructure of the Jaguars organization has undermined the quarterback. I've said for the longest time, because it is the Jacksonville Jaguars and I am used to things just going poorly for this team, they're going to end up Matthew Staffording him, where like everybody's like, oh, I don't think he's that good. Maybe he's not that good because he played on the Jaguars. And then he gets traded to like, I don't know, friggin' Tampa or something, and they go win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I actually think that like one of the things I was saying is like, even if somebody was going to trade for Trevor Lawrence, why would it be the Steelers? Like, I know the Steelers are quarterback desperate, but why would the Steelers be like, oh, we're the team that can fix him? Like, now, if the 49ers don't want to pay Brock Purdy, okay, like there you go. Like that to me sounds like, oh, there could be some realism to that. But like, what about the Steelers and Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator? Like, oh, we got this. We're just gonna take this Ferrari that needs a tune-up and we got it. Like that's in our bag. I don't see any of this working for anybody. But okay, let's assume that Trevor Lawrence is not going to happen. I think that's pretty safe. What the heck are the Steelers going to do at quarterback? What should they be doing at quarterback? Because the one part of this that rings true is that the Steelers don't have a lot of good options out there, and it's not crazy to imagine them getting kind of desperate.
So I think the Steelers are in a really weird spot where I think they need to kind of QB proof their offense, which by what I mean by that is build up so much talent up front and at skill positions where you can put a guy like Sam Darnold in there and you can get good play out of Sam Darnold because the skill position surrounding talent is really good. However, with where the Steelers are when it comes to most of their young players, George Pickens seems like you cannot trust George Pickens at all. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both might not be on the team next year. The offensive line is still in flux. You don't have a quality second receiver. All of these things require accumulation of draft picks. And I just think the best option for the Steelers right now is to go once again to the vet angle. Take a vet that might, like a borderline vet, like what the Vikings did with Sam Darnold this past year. Give a 1-year flyer on a bridge guy, and then maybe if you feel super intrigued on a guy day 2, day 3 of this draft that you just want to give a chance. I think you look at guys like Will Howard from Ohio State, maybe a Kyle McCord from Syracuse who is really impressed in this post-college football season cycle. I think that's where they need to go. But I also think this Steelers team wants to compete and thinks they can compete and thinks they can get over that wild card hump, which makes me think this is going to be the Aaron Rodgers spot.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the names to bring up. I was actually going to bring this list up to you. This is the betting odds for the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 starting quarterback as we sit here right now. Top 2, Kirk Cousins plus 500, Aaron Rodgers plus 550, tied with Justin Fields also plus 550. When you see those names at the top, Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, that kind of goes along with what you're saying there. But what it also tells me, and Alan and I haven't really broached this subject much, but I guess we can talk about it with you on here and get your thoughts. Kind of get the sense that leaning more and more towards maybe the Steelers really weren't that happy with either of the options that they had on their roster last year. And I know Ben Albright put that out there as well, that he's leaning towards them not bringing either guy back. What is your thought on that and those names at the top of that list?
I don't think either guy, we were talking about Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, I don't think either guy proved anything that they should continue to be a starter or get the chance to be a starter in Pittsburgh. I think Justin Fields, it looked fine, but sometimes the passing was still far too inconsistent. And then we saw how Russell Wilson tailed off towards the end of the season once everybody realized it's Russell Wilson, So I'm leaning more towards both guys end up not coming back and they just go ahead and start new, because one of the things that has stood out when it comes to Mike Tomlin, and especially with how he handled the quarterbacks this year, he's not afraid to completely go away from what the plan looked like and what looked good in order to try and go and get great. And I think that's what happened when they started Russ instead of Justin Fields. He was looking for great when he was getting okay from Justin Fields, which doesn't mean like they should keep Fields, but in the quest to always try and get over that wild card hump, I think they're always going to try and find an edge somewhere at the quarterback spot, which makes me think they're going to go outside the Steelers building this offseason to go get a quarterback.
I think it's interesting because this is a part of Mike Tomlin's coaching personality that I don't think a lot of people talk about. And that outside of the time that he's had Ben Roethlisberger, which is admittedly the vast majority of his coaching life, in 2019, benched Mason Rudolph for Duck Hodges, then benched Hodges back for Rudolph. In 2022, benched Mitch Trubisky for Kenny Pickett. In 2023, benched Pickett for Mason Rudolph. Last year went Fields to Wilson. Didn't really bench anybody because Fields was the backup at the beginning, but he's not opposed to making a change and plan. They will now have had completely new quarterback rooms from 21 to 22, and now from 23 to 24, and maybe from 24 to 25. So I kind of get it that they're not satisfied with being like, sure, Justin, now it's your turn. Come on down. I think they're really looking. I'm just not sure any of those options are better than just signing Justin Fields. Like, I don't know that I would prefer Kirk Cousins. Now, Cousins might have an offset, so like he may be free, but like I don't want to pay Aaron Rodgers real money if I can have Justin Fields for cheap, or Sam Darnold, or any of these other kind of vets that might be out there. Like, I think Fields is a perfectly fine option for the Steelers given what's out there. There's just not a lot out there.
Let me ask you this. I'm about to cut you off. Do you think there's something to be said, though, about them just feeling like they can't run it back? Like, do they have to also make that statement, and that is why they wouldn't bring either guy back, or no?
I think they have to understand that they can't run it back with this version of this Steelers team. I think this Steelers team as a whole, even outside of the offense, needs a facelift. It needs reinvention. What has worked for the Steelers before in terms of creating a really high quality defense while the offense just gets by isn't going to cut it anymore when you're in a division and in a conference with all of the mutant quarterbacks that you have to face year in and year out. Because every time the Steelers have lost in the wild card round, it has been to one of the mutant quarterbacks. So in order to get over the hump, you either have to get one of those guys or you have to completely QB proof the offense. And one of those is going to take a really long time. I think if you're going to try and create an offense that will cater to a guy like a Sam Darnold or Jameis Winston, if they decide to go down that path, you need to create an offense with all the playmakers necessary to widen the margin of error for those guys. Because if you saw what Sam Darnold did towards the end of the year, you're going to see that margin of error really closed. And then all the highlight Justin Jefferson plays turned into interceptions. All the evading sacks turned into sacks and turnovers. You have to create a QB-proof offense if you're not going to be in the range to go and get one of those guys. And unfortunately, they find themselves in a position where this draft class might not be it when it comes to getting a quarterback, which feels like we're back at 2022 for the Steelers, where they find themselves needing a quarterback, but the quarterback class isn't very good. So are they going to take the risk and make the jump for a guy there? Or do they learn from their mistakes and just go, you know what? We'll sign a vet and then we'll punt on this QB class and we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, I think the difference
there's years within there that you could have made the case for Steelers taking a quarterback. But like the two most glaring ones, right? 22 and now in 25. Look at the classes. Look at the classes that we're talking about. Like, why does this happen to us?
It's also like combined with they don't really have the capital to move up for those guys, especially when you consider the Titans, Raiders, the Browns, the Giants, all will be looking for quarterbacks. And the Raiders really, really want a quarterback in this class. So how are you going to jump from 21 all the way into the top 10 to go get a quarterback? It's just you find yourself in a really, really weird spot. And if you are jumping for a quarterback, again, that's a big jump for a guy like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I don't even think those guys are really worth where they're going to be drafted, let alone trading way up to get there, to get ahead of someone to draft them there. I do like the 26 quarterbacks a good bit better. I think the difference between this year and 22 for the Steelers is that they have a different general manager in place, Omar Khan, Andy Weidel. The assistant general manager came from Philly. I think they have an idea of what they want to be. You talk about quarterback proofing. I think that's a great way to put it. I think they want to build from the trenches out, looking at what the Eagles did, and obviously Andy coming from there. It's a great defensive line class. I think they might look that way and just say, hey, let's try to make this team as good as we can and put ourselves in a position. Maybe in 26, it's a better quarterback class. Maybe that's the year that they go and make a big jump up the draft board.
Yeah, I think this feels like the year where they finally just go, you know what? We're going to draft as many skill position and high-quality skill position players as possible, and we'll sign a bridge guy and see what happens. If it works, cool. Maybe we'll kick the tires again. If it doesn't, oh well. It was a one-year deal. We'll punt on it, and we'll go get a guy in 2026.
The two names I wanted to bring up on here out of this rookie class that were listed on this betting odds sheet that I'm looking at were Jalen Milroe at plus 800 and Jackson Dart plus 1,200. And JP, I wanted to get your thoughts on just the quarterback class in general, where obviously you can, by the tone of our voices, you can tell we haven't talked in a very high light, but just in general on this podcast, Alan and I have, listen, if you are one of these players or related to them, earmuffs. We have not talked very glowingly about this quarterback class on this podcast, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. The guys at the top, obviously, not within striking distance, as we've just talked about. So, like, out of the realistic possibilities that we could even add to this QB room, is there anybody that you feel like is going to be somebody that could come in here and at least compete, maybe add to the room?
Oh man, it's tough. It is a tough year to need a quarterback.
He's saying no. He's saying no.
It is a very tough year.
Very diplomatic of you.
I remember saying, if you need a quarterback in this class, no, you don't. You just go somewhere else. Because if you're not going to get a guy like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, you're kind of stuck. And when it comes to Jalen Milroe, you see the athletic potential, but he's so far away as a passer. And just some of the fundamental stuff that how long are you going to be willing to wait on a guy like that? With Jackson Dart, I think the Jackson Dart stuff has been really weird, specifically coming from the Senior Bowl.
Thank you.
Because he wasn't very good at the Senior Bowl.
I feel like I have been in, as a how drunk did I get in Mobile that I thought Jackson Dart was awful, and all these people think he was good, and I don't understand it. It's been
you woke up and you pull your own sweat at Veets, and you're like,
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Like, I know what I saw. Like, he arguably wasn't the best quarterback on that side of the Senior Bowl on the American team. And I just think in an offense that is so hyper college RPO gimmicky, being late on every read in a hyper college gimmicky offense often does not translate to the next level. And you know what? If it works, I mean, I'm not going to take that bet, but shoot, Brock Purdy turned into an NFL quarterback. Anything is possible, but I don't know with this QB class. When it comes to guys that I think maybe fit the Steelers offense and what they want to be, I mean, I think Tyler Shuck might be a nice option on day 3. He's old. Like, he's one of the older QB prospects, but when it comes to operating off of play action, using different arm angles, and actually wanting to test downfield off of these play action looks, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think Kyle McCord has really proved himself a lot during the pre-draft cycle. He actually looks like he can operate an NFL offense to some extent, despite the athletic tools being a massive limiter on his game. And I think Will Howard has a really strong chance of becoming QB3 with how well he played during the college football playoff. He's a big dude. I think, again, his athletic tools are also a little like you're wondering what the ceiling is there, but he can operate that style of offense. But again, I'm not touching either of those guys until day 3. So at that point, sure, it's free money at that point. You go ahead and try in round 4 or round 6 with one of those guys. If it works, great. If not, it was a 6th round pick. You can always go back to the board somewhere else.
JP, your latest mock draft at SBNation.com has the Steelers taking Matthew Golden from Texas at 21. Kenneth Grant from Michigan is on the board, and you got him going 1 pick later to Chargers. Now, Kenneth Grant has been one of my guys for a while. Sell me. Why Golden over Grant for the Steelers? I'm interested to hear your take on this one.
So my biggest thing is overall, this defensive tackle class is phenomenal. Like, I think Dane Brugler tweeted it out today. There are, I think, 40 or so defensive tackles that were invited to the combine this year. There were 21 last year. You were going to find a high quality defensive tackle on day 2 or day 3 of this draft. And as good as I think Kenneth Grant is, he's my DT2 right now. I just wonder if the quality depth of the defensive tackle class compared to a receiver class that also isn't that great, will it push that need up a little higher for the Steelers, who, like I said, really need any sort of weapon on the outside, because George Pickens is someone that can't be trusted day in and day out. Outside of that, you're throwing to Calvin Austin, who is kind of exclusively a slot receiver. Mike Williams is getting up there in age. Van Jefferson is more of a depth guy. And I think Matthew Golden, he kind of got overshadowed a little bit because Isaiah Bond was also at Texas, and the Sark offense kind of schemes up a lot of different things. Outside of like, he doesn't really have the greatest speed or long speed, but his body control and catch radius for a guy who's around 6 feet, 6'1" is really nice. And that meshes really well if the Steelers do decide to run it back with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. You want somebody who can go up and make those catches in those vertical situations, because that's kind of what Russ and Justin Fields both do. So I think Matthew Golden makes a lot of sense there. I think if Egbuka from Ohio State falls, that would be an incredible pick for them. But I just worry if they don't pick a receiver early, one of the top guys, you're having to stretch really hard to find a quality outside receiver on later days.
I mean, to be honest, it goes along with your idea of building an offense that's QB proof anyway, going that direction as opposed to the D tackle. So sorry, Alan, didn't we cut you off?
No, you're fine. Yeah. I'm still gonna ride or die for Kenneth Grant, because I think
Kenneth Grant's a phenomenal player. It would make a lot of sense, and plus a defensive line room of Keanu Benton, Kenneth Grant, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, and then Alex Highsmith on the edge like that. If you want to build a QB-proof team, you also got to build a QB-proof defense. So I completely understand. It makes a lot of sense. And I think that the Steelers are going to love a guy like Grant. They did a lot of work with some of the defensive tackles at the Senior Bowl. So I think drafting Kenneth Grant would be a really, really smart decision. But I also just like, man, this receiver class might bump a guy up where you're like, oh, we got to get him before we end up out of luck.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more thing, and we're going to circle back to QBs just for a second here, because I want an outsider's perspective on this. Now, obviously, you watch around the league, so looking at the Steelers, just with the way the staff is right now, we talked about, like, would they even be the best spot for Trevor Lawrence if you were trying to, I'm not saying he's in need of a rehab, but obviously get him back to the level that he was once at, or developing somebody that's so far away like Jalen Milroe. When you look at the Steelers coaching staff right now, like, do you have any faith that person even exists on the staff right now? Like, you look at Arthur Smith, Tom Arth, obviously, like, 0 for 1, not a long track record with first-round quarterbacks, but when you look at this organization right now, do you think that guy's even in place to be able to either rehab or develop the next guy? No, he's saying no, folks.
I think Arthur Smith sort of exists in this weird area for me as a play caller. We're like, oh, I see what you're trying to do, and I see the vision of it, but the execution of it is always so poor. And the situational play calling also doesn't make a lot of sense, where, you know, you're always kind of running into brick walls on early downs because you run into loaded box fronts and you end up putting your quarterbacks in 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s. So I wonder if that's a sustainable option for a young quarterback to always be in 3rd and 9. I mean, CJ Stroud was phenomenal his rookie season, but we saw what happens when you're always constantly put behind the 8 ball when it comes to 3rd down, and teams can just pin their ears back on an offensive line that looked overmatched, which sounds a lot like the Steelers. So I think it comes down to, I talked with Jordan Reed at ESPN, and he said the 3 things that you need for a young quarterback are play calling, playmakers, and protection. I think the Steelers have an idea of what they want to be and how they can get to having all of that, but the execution of it right now has not been that great. So I would worry about bringing in a young quarterback to kind of develop behind that offensive line with the weapons or lack thereof at this point, especially considering like their 3 most explosive targets or 3 most explosive like options offensively all might not be on the team next year. So Arthur Smith is, I don't want to say this to completely absolve Arthur Smith, but I think Arthur Smith is like the least of my problems right now when it comes to the talent acquisition. And that's kind of what I mean with where the Steelers are. Like, they need some high level talent. They need impact players on the offensive side of the ball. And they don't really have that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like, on one hand, it's very easy to sit there and nitpick things that Arthur Smith does wrong, especially because some of the things he does wrong are like glaring. Like goal line fades to his number 3 running back. And I'm saying, it's just like the entire fan base is like, well, that was dumb. And you can't really defend it. But also, I don't think the play calling really rates in terms of the problems with the Steelers offense either.
Yeah, I think we go to play calling is a very easy thing because you see the face all the time. Like it's, oh, the OC did it again. But it's really hard to scheme when you can't block. And if you can't, and again, we saw it in the Super Bowl. If you can't block, you're going to lose games. And I think that's kind of where the Steelers find themselves. And I'm excited and intrigued about what they've done to build up the offensive line. Zach Frazier was phenomenal. I think Mason McCormick played really well in his time. I think getting Troy Fautanu back healthy will kind of piece some of that stuff together. So you will have some of the protection. But again, I have a lot of questions about where they go when it comes to the skill position that kind of make me really hesitant on them bringing in a young quarterback this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Alan, you got anything else?
No, JP, tell us what you're working on at SB Nation.
Of course, I'm doing a whole lot of draft work. We're going to start firing up some NFL draft files on guys that I think are really interesting. Some of the guys are going to be really talked about this draft cycle, and some more of the underrated names that you might not hear about as often. We got the NFL Combine coming up. Going to do a lot of work when it comes to that. But make sure to follow me, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
There we go. And where can the people follow you?
You can follow me at Acosta32_JP on Twitter, Acosta32JP on Blue Sky. And if you want to, you just find some of the random tweets that I have here and there. I'll post a lot about comparing NFL draft prospects to things that have nothing to do with football. So make sure to be on the lookout for that.
I'm
that
intrigued.
Piques my interest. Yeah, that certainly piques my interest. Alan, tell people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account, SteelersNow.com. Go there and read the words so that I can get paid. And like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. As we can, so thankful for each and every one. You got over 15,000 last week, and we keep that rolling. So make sure you don't miss an episode.
Yeah, what do we have right now? 15,029. So 15,000 and Ryan Mundy subscribers right now on the channel.
I like it.
You got a random 29 to throw at me?
Shamarko Thomas, Ryan Watts.
Oh, yes. Big shout out to Ryan Watts, by the way.
Safety.
Hope that recovery's going well. Yeah, it's a safety. It's a good safety number. There we go. Anyways, you can find me at Zachary Smith, PGH, like Alan said. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Big shout out to JP Acosta again for joining us. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.